So this is Kitsap Sun editorial board with the County Commissioner District 1 candidates. And what we do is we give you guys each 2 minutes to begin, and then we'll launch into Q&A. You see how that works before. Jim Campbell will be the timekeeper for our introductory part, and we'll let Rob go first as he comes. So 2 minutes each.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Again, my name is Robert Gelder, and I was elected last November as Kitsap County Commissioner to complete an unexpired term. I have 20 years of experience in the health and human services industry, with 10 years in executive management, senior leadership, most recently with Martha and Marion Paulsbo. And I have my bachelor's degree from the University of Rochester. Prior to joining the Board of County Commissioners, I served on the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee and on the 2011 budget panel. I am an active member of the Paulsbo North Kitsap Rotary Club and was awarded the 2005 Community Builder Award from the Paulsbo Chamber of Commerce, and I'm in the first class of 40 under 40 in Kitsap. And unfortunately, I'm no longer under 40. But I think as commissioner, it's really important that we are involved in our community side by side with neighbors to make a difference and to keep Kitsap great. My priorities over the next 4 years include consolidating services with other jurisdictions to achieve economies of scale, continuing to simplify the land use and permitting process through the use of technology and process improvements, but also to support job growth by supporting small businesses from a variety of market sectors, along with collaborating on economic development activities. Now, I think the work that the county needs to do isn't just about a resource issue, the improvements that need to be made. We need to look at both processes and people, and that includes the use of technology that helps to bring county services to the fingertips of our citizens in the comfort of their own home. Now, in my opinion, leadership is not just about identifying problems, but it's about finding solutions. And leadership is not about driving your own agenda, but it's about helping to remove barriers so that communities can realize their own. And thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll get into a few of those things, I'm sure. Chris.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to the Kitsap Sun editorial board. And again, my name is Chris Tibbs. I had the privilege of running for Kitsap County Commissioner against Rob last year. It was one of the closest elections in North Kitsap County history. It was certainly anything but a landslide. It was very close. I am currently a business owner. I have a Seattle-based restaurant provisions company. We sell to 34 Azteca restaurants, as well as about another 15 other restaurants at this time. We sell everything from glassware to straws to mixers. And that's part of where I'm coming from as an entrepreneur. I've had successes, I've had failures. In 2005, I filed for bankruptcy when I lost a business. And so I definitely see both areas of success and failure. To me, I think it's important to pick oneself up and move forward. For too long, I think our county has had commissioners who focus on personal pet projects as opposed to the benefit of all of Kitsap County. I think we have to do better. I served with Rob on the budget committee. In fact, I was the vice chair of the budget committee. During that time, I was able to see for a year as the vice chair, time and time again, the county government, various department heads, various elected officials who really didn't understand cost-benefit analysis and really understand service to the citizens. We have to provide a consistent level of service to Kitsap County. After all, only in Kitsap County will you receive 4 days of service for 7 days of taxation. And I think that has to be addressed. We have to work better. The people of Kitsap deserve better. And one of my priorities, in fact, my first priority is to go ahead and instill performance audits in Kitsap County. I think we have to have performance audits. I think we need to have an independent performance auditor. Much like the city of Bremerton system, I think we need to look at each and every county department and say where we can save money and where we can make more efficiencies. I'm a member of the Bremerton Chamber of Commerce, the Bainbridge Island Chamber of Commerce, the Kingston Chamber of Commerce, Paulsbo, Port Orchard, the North Mason Chamber of Commerce. I'm also a former Bremerton Central Line, and with that, I'll stop. Thank you so much.
You can conclude your thought. That's fine. Or is that just tell us you were in there? Okay.
I saw the timekeeper.
Well, Chris, let's just talk about the past year. We sat here a year ago. We talked about kind of some of the same issues that are still all here. Right. Tell me, from your perspective, what's different about this time around? Why would someone change their vote and choose you rather than the guy who's been sitting in the seat and has another year experience?
Because I think we need an independent perspective at the county government. I think for far too long we've had one party rule. I don't think that it's an epidemic of evil, so to speak, but I think that it's oftentimes good to have multi-party participation in county government. Certain issues in which my opponent and I are very different. I do not support the lawsuit at the Kitsap Sun Revolver Club. I think that that's wrong-headed. I think that that's a waste of county funds. I'd like to see a depolarization of the county DCD department. I think that the commissioners should not pick and choose winners when it comes to developing the rural property and the property of Kitsap County. I think we need to have a uniform approach that treats all equally. And so, oftentimes I know challengers always pick apart DCD, but I think that the people at DCD are phenomenal in the sense that they worked very hard. You look at what county DCD's done with the LEAN program, what they've done to really shorten the time and permitting processes. There's a lot of positive there in DCD. And what happened and what you saw was county commissioners stepped back. DCD said, we have an economic problem. We're losing money. We have to implement SmartGov. So what we're going to do, we're going to accept that this is a difficult time, embrace that challenge, and we're going to be better for it. And I think that they are. You look at what Larry Keaton's doing. I think that they're better for going through that process. But by the same token, I think it's a wasted effort and an unfortunate effort that our commissioners would choose to then force Larry Keaton to go after the Kitsap County Gun Club. I think that that's unfortunate. And I think there's an example where I think government needs to step back, recognize this organization has operated for over 80 years without any safety issues. And I think that we have to say, what? By and large, we need to treat all people equally in Kitsap County government.
Before we go to those things, I'll give Rob a chance. 1 year, now that you're doing the job, how are you different as a candidate now than you were when you met with us last?
How I'm different, I think now is really having a greater grasp of the complexities and the nuances that it takes to be in this position and to assist in running county government. And I think that's really what it boils down to. It's about a partnership. As a county commissioner, you are one of three. And so it takes at least two to make any decision. You cannot, it's about statesmanship, it's about partnerships and building that collaboration. And I think that's one of the things now that I bring forward to this role, besides just doing the job. I think to dispel some of the issues around the Kitsap Rifle and Revolver Club, if I may, that is, I have come out on the record a number of times in support of them. They play a very important role in the community in terms of recreational shooting, as do the other clubs. But when it comes to the role of DCD in that, they've identified some land use issues that went forward in the case. And really at that point in time, it became outside of the purview of the county commissioners. That became the responsibility and charge of the prosecuting attorney. And that is another separately elected official of which we have no control. Often people have talked about, well, if you don't agree with that, then reduce their budget by that and by X amount that it might have cost the prosecuting attorney to wage that lawsuit. And we could, if two commissioners wanted to be spiteful in that way, we could do that, sure. But once we make that allocation and that budget appropriation, we lose all control over how that ultimately is spent. That falls to, once that budget is made, the prosecuting attorney will determine what is supported and what is not.
What about Chris? He kind of led in with saying, and we've heard this before, is that it's always three Democrats have been in this office for a while.
In recent history, but not always. Yeah.
No, I know not always, but the last couple of years now. How do you feel that you set yourself apart, that you're not just walking lockstep with the other two people on the board? What have you done? What have you shown that says, here's me as an independent doing the best for my district?
I think that, there was a couple of things. Last year, and I think I brought this up in November, that I took a different step or a different position on the countywide planning policies relative to the fully contained communities, because I thought that I did not agree with the position that the other two commissioners took, and I took that vote. What it really boils down to is that the work and decision making and the compromise happens long before you ever get to a meeting. It's about going through that work and having those discussions and those disagreements early on. And that has continued to be the case. And when we don't agree, we don't agree, and we respectfully have that conversation in our board meetings, and we'll do that. And that's just the way it goes. So I do bring an independent voice. No one does any decision making for me other than me.
We had a story a couple weeks ago about how your budget analyst is saying revenues have kind of stabilized heading into the next year, and hopefully that means not as much cutting away from some of the services that you've seen the last few years or some of those jobs. And I'm not saying time to start spending again, but obviously there's going to be a way to say, how are we going to better serve the community over in the next budget cycle? What's your priority? Let's talk about opening on Fridays, where that fits on your priority list. Let's talk about restoring hours to employees, county employees also. Is that something you just, which of those are you going to put at the top of the list? Is there something else that you think we've learned over the last few years that we could be doing better here? This is where we want to make sure we preserve. We'll start with Rob.
Well, I think, restoring hours, there's any number of staff that would love to be able to have more hours. They've been cut to 0.9, 0.85, some 0.8 FTE. And so that's had a huge financial impact on them. So if they had the opportunity to work on Fridays, they would probably jump at it. And ultimately, yeah, I would love to be able to restore those hours to the community, but it comes at a cost. And one of the things that part of the conversation this year is that, yes, the initial revenue projections look like they're, we'll call stable for 2013, but what would be the financial impact for opening up on Fridays? Now, some departments would be able to do that more easily, like the auditor's office is, all their staff, or a majority of the staff, are full-time, but have adjusted schedules. They could potentially flex fairly easily. But there are other departments that are down to the bare bones, like the assessor or the treasurer's office, and they would need to increase staffing to make that happen. But the thing is, even those stable budgets, stable projections for revenues next year are not enough to basically restore that level of services. We're looking at maintaining next year without having to cut. So maybe for the first time next year, we'll be able to have another conversation other than about what positions and who's going to take the cut. Ultimately, with 3 years of no pay increases, my priority would be looking at maintaining the resources that we have in the community and looking to how can we retain the qualified workforce that the county has.
And the citizens of Kitsap County in the budget process. Rob and I served together on the budget committee, and time again, it felt that, I think the consensus from the committee at that point was that we're not having honest, direct communication with the staff. When you look at how Kitsap County has chosen to reduce the budget, these reductions, which have become lack of revenue generation, have been largely across the board, and each department's been treated as equal. I think you can't do that. I think you have to spend the first dollars of our taxation. That money must be spent on sheriff's deputies, the last 10%, not the last 10 cents. We have to have a priority of government. Law and justice has to be fully funded. We have one of the lowest staffed sheriff's departments in the state of Washington, and we need to fix that. That certainly puts a huge stress on the sheriff's department, huge stress on first responders. We're not even discussing the county jail, where we have a record low of corrections officers. So, do I like parks? Yes, I like parks, but I think that you have to look by and large and say, what is the most important core function the county government provides? How do we preserve life and property? Aside from that, oftentimes I do not feel the county's been as transparent as it should be when it comes to budgeting process. I think we all understand it's a very long process. It takes many months to go through and draft a final budget in the county. But until we say, we have to reward the departments that actually have been very aggressive about reducing costs. Look at district court. They went from a paper system to a paperless system. That department's been very aggressive about reducing costs. The assessor's office has been very aggressive about reducing costs. And to treat all departments as equal and cut all of their budget in equal portion is, I think, unfair. And oftentimes, the county commissioners will say, we're going to cut the budget by 10%, but we're going to make an exception for the sheriff. Well, I think that makes sense when you do that 1 to 2 or 3% exception. But I think we got ahead of this and prioritized what it is Kitsap County government does. We'd be a lot further along than treating each department as equal. We just can't do that.
Where does opening the offices back open on Fridays rank on that list of
That's
things
the
to
number
do?
one priority because, look, right now the people in Kitsap County, in my view, are getting shortchanged. They, like I said, I know it's a great line to say that only Kitsap County can receive 4 days of service for 7 days of taxation. But bottom line, that's what's happening in Kitsap County. Our commissioners have worked at preserving the workforce of Kitsap County. And that's not to take away, in my view, that the workforce is inferior. I think we have a strong and competent workforce in Kitsap County, in the county government. But I think you have to make dramatic changes for the budget cycle. The money, the revenues are forecast to come back. We feel more comfortable about where the spending is going to go. But we never really addressed the Kitsap County government's overstaffing issues. We have to fully operate 5 days a week. And if you're going to go to a 4-day work week, then why didn't we go Tuesday through Saturday? Now, I know you're going to say unions and we have to renegotiate contracts. When you go to the Department of Licensing, they're open 5 days a week, Tuesday through Sunday. Tuesday through Saturday, sorry. Let's be more responsive to the citizens of Kitsap County. I would rather us, if we have to be closed through the work week, I would rather we are open on Saturday. So we are responsive to the citizens, so they can go and pay their bills. They can get licenses. They can go in and actually interface with their government. And I don't think that's asking too much. I think that we have to provide those levels of service to our county.
You're saying we need more money for law enforcement, get these things open, but there's some overstaffing issues
Well, I think
as well.
overstaffing. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. You were.
I think until you prioritize your budget, the first payment I make is for my home, then I make the cable bill. I think you have to prioritize your budget. In Kitsap County government, we prioritize that by fully funding the sheriff. We fully fund the coroner. The coroner's taken massive reductions in the last 4 years. This is an office that oftentimes is staffed by one person. We can't have a county government working that way. I think that you have to take a long, hard look at fortunately, Parks and Recs and more discretionary spending. I think that's where you have to look at cutting.
That's where your trade-off is.
My trade-off is, and that's where you're going to see the trade-off. I think that, if it was mine to do, and I've talked with Walt Washington, I've talked with the county auditor, Walt wants it to be open 5 days a week. He wants the government open. He says, look, the courthouse should be open 5 days a week. I can staff it, let's do it. Walt's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. But that's the kind of, we have to do this to make this work. In fact, if you look at what he's done as the county auditor, he's been very, very successful at making the county auditor's office much more responsive to the citizens of Kitsap County, much more user-friendly. I don't think that you win by channeling more people through online services. I think that your county government should be responsive to you and be very accessible to you. And I think that it was a poor decision by all 4 county commissioners over the last 4 years to reduce unilaterally across the board 10% cuts, or whatever that may be.
I would have to take issue with that. That's actually not how it happened. So if Mr. Tibbs had been more involved in the budgeting process over the past couple of years, it was 2010 where we looked at some, would you recommend a 7 or a 9% cut? Actually, for the 2011, the fall of 2010 for the 2011 budget season. And even though that was what the recommendations were, it never was implemented that way. It was just what the recommendations might be. And even last year that we had the conversation, there was no way, there was an acknowledgement that you can't do across the board cuts. It just wasn't sustainable that way. When you have departments when they have been cut to the bone and they don't have any more to give, you can't really just go and expect to take it equitably across the board. So I would take issue with that. The fact that the Board of County Commissioners over the past several years has taken every step to make the whole budget process a lot more transparent. Every budget hearing is recorded. It's available to the community. They're public meetings. Everyone can be there. This year we'll be adding an additional meeting at the very end as sort of a budget open house for the community members to come in and ask specific questions about that. But we do have a process. That's partly why it takes so long, is that we want to be very thoughtful about how we make that available to the community. And I think that when we talk about budget priorities, when we talk about sort of public safety, is the #1 priority. I agree. But you need to figure out how you define public safety, and it goes beyond just the sheriff and the coroners and the jail. When we talk about having safe buildings, we need to make sure that we fund the Department of Community Development. When we talk about safe roads and public safety, we need to make sure that our Public Works Department is able to function as they need to. So I think we need to look more broadly at what public safety truly means. And I think to the commissioner's credit in the county, over the past couple of years, we are now, even though we've lost $12 million in our annual fund budget from over the past 5 years, we made a concerted effort a couple of years ago, as opposed to trying to, initially when the economic downturn hit, we were trying to just sort of put the Band-Aid on, thinking, well, maybe it won't last that long. So we continued to take out of reserves in order to make some of those budgets. But a couple of years ago, in 2010, we made a concerted effort to actually reinvest and budget for an additional $1 million to the general fund reserves. That came, and then last year, by being very aggressive, we underspent. Our revenues were better than expected, and we underspent. So they were able to add another $2 million to our reserves. So right now, we have healthier reserves now than we did several years ago. And the reason why that's important is because it makes the county a better credit rating. And if we are a better credit risk, then we can go out to refund long-term debt to drive some of the costs down. And it's all about being better stewards of the limited tax resources, the tax dollars that we get from the community. So I think that's important to note as well.
You know, very quickly, if I could.
Go ahead.
You know, Mr. Gelder talks about public safety and the roads. The roads fund is funded separately, not from the general fund, but from a separate specific roads fund. And by the way, Public Works is not nearly as hurt financially at this point as Law and Justice and the Sheriff's Office. You know, I would say public safety is more than just the sheriff and the coroner. I would say it would be Superior Court, District Court, the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. But I think it's a misconception to say that the county budget process has been done through an open process. Oftentimes in Kitsap County government, when our commissioners want consensus and they want the public to support something, they will appoint a board or a committee. And generally that committee is not necessarily representative of the public, but of what they want the outcome to be.
How do you do that differently?
Well, first you appoint individuals based on merit. Rob Gelder and I served together on the Kitsap County Budget Committee. The way in which the appointment happened for me was, I think, different than Rob's, but I was shocked. I got to tell you, it was not transparent. There was no transparency in it.
What do you mean?
Well, the reason I was appointed to the Kitsap County Budget Committee was I had one discussion with one county commissioner. I met the party chair of the opposite party, the Democratic Party. We sat down, we had a cocktail, and 2 weeks later, without going through any other process, I received a letter from the Kitsap County Board of Commissioners saying, "Mr. Tibbs, congratulations, you've been appointed to the Kitsap County Budget Committee." That to me was a red flag. That to me thought that that's an odd way to go forward with an appointment. Having served on that committee and personally worked with the people for over a year, staff was very supportive, but the commissioners had a preordained outcome of what would happen. Look what's happening with the gun range as far as they're looking at doing a gun ordinance committee. And the committee is stacked essentially against the gun club's interests. So it's not an equal 50% margin. Now, when we compose these committees and build these committees, we have to create committees that are representative of the people. If we're going to have an advisory committee that we say represents the people, let's include the people, not just one particular portion or people who are fundraisers or donors for one political party.
What's the idea to do that, Rob? I mean, obviously the meetings are open, saying they put them online, they're saying to try to get people interested. We have reporters who are there that know they aren't packed full every single time unless it's a special interest group. So what's the strategy on getting more of that feedback?
Well, I think it goes back to having a longer discussion with the various department heads. I through the course of this last year, I met with many department heads, many elected officials, and some of the discussions, of course, have been more beneficial than others, more positive than others. But there's a large amount of people in Kitsap County government that say, look, we know this is unsustainable. We know that our commissioners really aren't being as responsive as we would like. There's concerns right now at this point from directors I've talked to that they don't have consistency in the Board of County Commissioners. They feel there's been a vacuum since the county administrative position went vacant. And they feel that there's a lack of transparency and consistency on the commission. I think that, I guess when it goes back to the underlying, to be more transparent is, you do what you say you're going to do, and you don't point people based solely on their political donations or support.
Okay, what I was trying to ask, you just said there was a disconnect between the department heads and the commissioners, and we can let Rob answer that question in a moment. What I thought you were saying is the county is not doing a good job of being responsible to a wide swath of constituents because they're choosing people based on special interests, or that's the only people. What's the strategy on how are you going to get those people involved so that you do get honest feedback on what people want?
And
that's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, that's a great question in the sense that all throughout this last year and this year, a number of people don't understand the role of the county government necessarily. The average voter doesn't necessarily know, or the average taxpayer doesn't know that 70% of the population of Kitsap County lives outside of the 4 metropolitan cities. And so your commissioners have a lot of authority in what you do with your property and what you do with your life. So communicating with the population is huge. Talking to people, getting input. Of course, it's not as easy as saying, please come join our committee because we'd like you to sit on this arts commission or we'd like to sit on the budget committee. But I think that oftentimes commissioners bypass other viable candidates. And I haven't seen all the people applying for the jobs and all who haven't applied. But I think oftentimes our commissioners do bypass qualified candidates to make political appointments to these advisory committees. And then they say, well, the people have spoken, they made this recommendation, there was a discussion, but I think they already knew what the outcome of that was going to be as they appointed the committee.
Rob, so there's 2 questions I want to ask you. One is with the administrative officer, and that was a budget move, if I understand correctly, when that position was when Nancy's position was eliminated. To respond to the kind of the accusation that department heads and commissioners aren't seeing eye to eye or communicating well with one another. How is that relationship work from your end? How are you working on it? Does it need to be worked on? And then the second question would be, how do you get more regular folks involved in county government so you can hear honest feedback?
Mm-hmm. If we're talking about the directors that report specifically to the Board of County Commissioners, those are the only ones that really I would think of that I interact with. We have, in the absence of a county administrator, because Nancy did leave a little over almost a year and a half ago now, and we did not fill the position because of the budget. It was difficult recruiting somebody for what we could afford, but we moved on from there. I think what it did for us, what the county administrator does in that function, and it's something that I think we need to revisit, is that it provides a conduit of information, especially the challenges of having a 3-commissioner board. When you have 3, it's difficult you end up having to meet 3 times to be able to figure out where everybody's at if it's not separately at another board meeting. So it really facilitated the process and the communication flow for the department directors and the other electeds. But I think since that time, we have learned to move forward. I personally have appreciated being able to work more directly with the department directors that we have. We meet monthly together. I mean, we're meeting all the time, but we specifically meet together over lunch, the county commissioners and the department directors, to understand what's going on and how we can help facilitate and support them in their work. So there's things that we can do there, but it's the challenge that's the nature of the beast. If it's other electeds, I continue to reach out to them whenever possible, and I always have an open door policy. So I've not heard anything specifically about concerns about the lack of access or transparency about the Board of County Commissioners. When it comes to appointing or getting sort of that community participation on different committees, the majority of the committees that the county has are long-term standing committees. So you're talking about like the Arts Board, or more importantly for me, are the community advisory councils. So what we do is we actively recruit in those specific communities for people, and it's a volunteer board. And it really is dependent on who wants to step up and get involved. And if we don't have anybody, yes, there's probably a certain amount of active recruitment potentially, or we wait and, I think more appropriately, wait and leave the position open until someone really truly is engaged in the community and wants to step up and participate. When it comes to, I think what Mr. Tibbs is alluding to is the Gun Range Ordinance Committee and sort of how that came to pass. And that one it's unique because it's one of those things that was actually written into code, sort of what the makeup of that was. And in terms of representation from the Sheriff's Department, Department of Community Development, 2 of the gun clubs, I don't know why the 3rd was never included in terms of the Bremerton Skeet.
Were you not involved in that discussion before before it was pinpointed who was going to be the gun clubs?
Oh, I don't get the question.
When did you find out that the KRRC wasn't one of the clubs?
Oh, no, it is.
I know.
It is. No, the Bremerton Trap and Skeet was not, per ordinance, one of the gun clubs that would be part of the committee. So the Kitsap Rifle and Revolver Club in Polsbo are represented on that ordinance committee. And then the other three are appointees. But given the time frame, I went with the, basically looking to someone that from my district that was, I know had a background in shooting in terms of growing up. It was that on a ranch in Montana, had that, an appreciation for recreational shooting, but also serves on our planning commission and also brought that land use perspective together. So for me, that was a great marriage of the two kind of perspectives to bring to that conversation.
One of the projects in your district that we write about the most is the OPG land, the 7,000 acres of the North Kitsap Legacy Partnership. I think we're all familiar with where things are at this stage. It's a big fundraising question right now. I think it's maybe one of the biggest deals, but there's also some dealings with the county and how this is all going to sort out. I'd like maybe very briefly just your opinion on the project and maybe what you bring to the table to getting this thing done, and whether it should be done in the manner that is proposed right now.
You know, I have a lot of concerns about the Bay and Forest Initiative. We're talking about a large tract of land. We're still going through fundraising to develop enough money to purchase that land from Pope. I think Pope Resources is in a tough spot. I think that this land should potentially be developed, but I think that they're not allowed to develop this land the way it maybe should be developed. You know, bottom line, we're talking about raising a significant amount of money, public money. At this point, the tribes have contributed a large portion of that money, the Suquamish and the S'Klallam tribe. But we're talking about a huge tract of land. We're taking that land off the tax rolls. We're talking about, after we take that land off the tax rolls, handing it over to a conservatory. I'm concerned about, you know, Representative Hansen pushed through some initiatives to the state, Washington State through Olympia, that allows Kitsap County to financially support the project. Now, Kitsap County hasn't directly come out and said we're going to go ahead and write the check for the balance of what's owed. And I certainly hope we would not do that. But there's a lot of questions I have and concerns I have when we talk about funding and purchasing this large tract of land. You know, I don't think county government should be in the land owning business. I really don't. I think that land should rightly be owned by private individuals. It's a large chunk of land. There's a lot of time and energy being dedicated to that. And I think that those resources could certainly be spent elsewhere. Performance audits for Kitsap County, I think, would be a great place to start. Or prioritizing the county government, you know, for levels of service would be a great place to start. You know, we can't even provide 5 days of service at the courthouse, yet we're facilitating large expanse purchases of land. And it really does concern me. I mean, the idea that Drew Hansen would work so hard, Representative Hansen, to allow Kitsap County now to be exempted from this taxation if we had purchased this land or participated financially concerns me. So I have questions. I'd like to know where the money is going to come to purchase all of this land. I don't think we're going to get all of this money through the tribes and through donations. So I'd like to know where this money is going to come if we're going to be serious about buying this land. And, you know, oftentimes I feel that Kitsap County has a very carrot and stick approach to land development in Kitsap County. Certainly Pope wants to develop Port Gamble properly. There's been plans and discussions for almost a decade to develop Port Gamble. The two really are intertwined, the Port Gamble project development and the Bay and Forest Initiative. And I think that probably is wrong-headed. I think the Port Gamble is to a point where it should have been developed 5 years ago if Pope would want to do that. I think that Pope has owned this land for a long time. And I don't like that we keep putting the two projects so close together. That concerns me.
Well, the fact that the two projects are so closely aligned is because of OPG. You know, when you think about it, this is in many ways, their brainchild. When they, as a company, decided that they wanted to move out of the area and divest their holdings here, it presented a great opportunity, and it's a wonderful PR opportunity for them as well. But why it's so important to us is the fact that this won't happen again. If we're not successful this time, and I'm not going to say that we are going to be successful, I think we have some great potential to hit some home runs in this project overall, but are we going to be successful in all 7,000 acres? I'm not sure at this point in time. The tribes to date have not donated or purchased any of the property. None of the property has changed hands at this point in time. What has moved forward is an appraisal process of the 5 different blocks that are involved. And I think really wanting to look at, okay, you have this tremendous asset in our community that once lost will never be found again. This is not only just about development. There are possibilities of what we could do. We don't have to lose the development potential of that property. We could, through the transfer of development rights, we could potentially move that around somewhere else and leave the land as a whole. But it stands right now that it's 20-acre parcels, and to actually be able to afford to develop all those 20-acre parcels, that would be a huge amount of infrastructure that would have to go into that property. Not only does it provide us with a potential conservation opportunity, but it's also economic development and environmental. Because if you lose, given that the Kitsap County has no mountains, no snowpack to recharge our aquifers, what falls here as rain is all that we have. So if we were to lose that 7,000 acres to development, or even portions of it, and then it becomes covered, then that basically sheds that much more water from our landscape and reduces the ability of us to actually recharge our aquifers that we're going to be drawing down on. And there will be additional growth in our community. We're going to have to be able to provide that service into the future. So there's a huge environmental impact as well. But it's also economic development in that 2 things. I really see it. I know that my Mr. Tibbs has been critical of me in the past in terms of my support of what we'll call ecotourism, but tourism as a whole is a huge economic sector in our region. It is basically responsible for 133,000 jobs in the region and over $10 billion in revenue. That is an economic sector that you just can't brush off. And there's a portion of that that's part of Kitsap County. But beyond that one market sector, what it does is it provides a framework. It becomes a draw for the region, but also for all those businesses that are looking to relocate. The number one reason why businesses relocate to a particular area is because the owner wants to live there. You create this asset in the community, it becomes a draw for those businesses, it becomes a draw for the ability to recruit and retain the qualified employees that like the quality of life that we'd have in Kitsap County. So I think for all of those reasons, it's an important project to continue to support. And what I bring to the table as part of that conversation is the ability to help negotiate, the ability to help be the statesman in all of that, to sort of bring together at times 3 very different agendas. When you figure the county is sort of in many ways a neutral player, and you have 2 tribes and the landowner involved. So it really takes a fair amount of finesse to bring to that conversation, and that's what I bring to it.
What's your relationship like with the tribes?
It's very good. I have a good working relationship with both of them, and I have an ongoing standing meeting with Chairman Sullivan. And so we will meet on any number of topics. It's more than just the Kitsap Forest and Bay project. But yeah, very, very collegial, and we're working with the Suquamish tribe right now on some projects around the Highway 305 and Suquamish Way, trying to address some of the traffic concerns in that corridor.
You respond?
I would like to know really what percentage of that $10 billion regional funding, of that money really benefits Kitsap County. I mean, that's a big number to throw out, $10 billion and over 100,000 jobs. What is the region we're talking about? Are we including King County, Snohomish, Pierce? Are we including Jefferson County? I have to tell you, I love Kitsap County. I've lived here my entire life. I enjoy North Kitsap. It's been my home my entire life. But I'll tell you, I don't believe there's a huge number of individuals that are tourists that come to North Kitsap, specifically for North Kitsap. I see a number of people riding through, who drive through, who are going to the Olympics, or going to the mountain. But I don't see a number of people who come specifically for our forest in North Kitsap. And I'm not trying to negate that argument. I'm not trying to say ecotourism isn't a viable economy for Kitsap, but I think that it's only a small fraction of the total economy of Kitsap County. Bottom line, 1/3 of our economy comes directly from the US Navy or federal funding. 1/3 of our economy essentially is people who work in Seattle, like me, and who live in North Kitsap, by and large, North Kitsap, Bainbridge, and Paulsville, and Squamish. And the other 1/3 of our economy really is service-based, the people who serve the other 2/3. So I have to tell you, the idea of ecotourism, I think, offers a lot of potential. But I think oftentimes we start focusing on eco-friendly issues, I think we lose the big picture, and I'll give you an example. When we were looking at having NASCAR come to Kitsap County, in the South Kitsap industrial area, and NASCAR to me is a prime example of where Kitsap County went wrong. The discussion at the time was, we don't want NASCAR, it's going to be environmental impact issues, we don't want to have all this traffic. But one of the largest arguments was, if we don't have NASCAR, we can have seed. We can have the seed project. Let's put all our eggs in seed. Well, NASCAR was revoked. We had the last moment hold the permits before they could go ahead and break ground and sign a contract. Seed was a complete flop, and now, according to the city of Bremerton and Mr. Overton, the best possible use for a parcel of that property is for a reception center, Washington State Prison in Kitsap County, in Bremerton. I think oftentimes we start chasing the dream of ecotourism. I think that at that point, I think we oftentimes get left with a jail. I don't want a prison in Kitsap County, and that's a city of Bremerton issue. That's the property owner's issue. It's his choice to develop that land. If the DOC agrees to build and does the contract there at Skia, that's wonderful. They're going to build some infrastructure. But think about this. We had a chance to have NASCAR in Kitsap County, and now we're going with a prison. All of the felons in the state of Washington who do bad things, who murder people, who do bad things, are going to come to beautiful Bremerton, are going to be ferreted out from there to the various different detention centers in the state. I don't want that for Bremerton. I want jobs, I want economic development. But I think when you start going down that path.
Okay, so how do you attract, I mean, what I thought Rob was saying was ecotourism may be part of it, but what you were saying is you're creating an environment where it's attractive for a business owner says, wow, that's a beautiful place, I want to live there. What's your incentive?
As a business owner, I think that's a flawed statement. I don't think that the number one reason businesses move are because business owners want to be there. You know, I have a business in Seattle. We work in Seattle up and down the I-5 corridor. We're over on that side of the water because the vast majority of our customers happen to be over there, so we have to be responsive to them. I am fortunate, I live in Squamish, I can take the ferry boat and go to work. That's fortunate for me. I don't want to live in Seattle. I like the rural characteristics of Kitsap County. I want to see a rural Kitsap County. But I have to balance my want for a rural Kitsap County, my want for environmentalism, with the same realities that a property owner, by and large, should be able to develop large tracts of land if they'd like to, by and large, at their discretion. I mean, I'm not advocating.
Here's what I was asking, though. I was saying, the contention is we need to bring business into Kitsap County. I think we'd all agree on that.
Yes,
it's good
absolutely.
for us, it's good for growth.
Right.
You're a business owner, you have a business that you take across the water, and there's a reason because your customer demand is. But if you're a leader in this county, you need to be saying, hey, guy who has a factory in Kent, this is why I should be here. What are you telling them this is why I should be there, and how does the county get involved with achieving that vision?
Well, two things. One, if you tell the guy who has a factory in Kent, I want you to come to North Kitsap, and that's great, but he can't build his factory in North Kitsap. We're not zoned for that. You can't build that on those 7,000 acres. There's zoning, but I mean, really, you can't put that factory on this parcel of land. If you look at the land that we can develop on, the South Kitsap industrial area, where we have an opportunity to really see that project through in partnership with the city of Bremerton and the Port of Bremerton, that to me is manufacturing business. But when you look at what happened earlier this year, when the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council had a grant funding come through, and they had prioritized various projects, including the Buckland Hill project and phase 2 of Skia, the federal dollars had come through. Originally, that money, about $2 million, was going to go to the second phase of the Skia Connector Road. This is a road that's vital for the infrastructure for Skia, for the South Kitsap industrial area. After all, you can't really build a warehouse if you don't have a road to keep your trucks there. So it certainly is a public-private partnership in demonstrating that if we build the roads, you can build factories. So let's do this together. Our commissioners and the KRCC voted at the last moment to change that funding priority, and the funding priority went to the Buckland Hill project, in which they're trying to enlarge to 5 lanes of traffic, build a larger bridge over some of the shoreline there. And so we took money from what would have been an economic development, an opportunity that was phase 2 that was funded at $2 million. And then we took that money away to a $14 million project where we raised, I think, $6 to $7 million at last count. So we're not fully funded. We can't start the project. And by the way, next year there may not be necessarily a need for the project because Silverdale may be a city. It may be their choice, their discussion where they want to enlarge that road. I think that's where it's wrong-headed.
Did you vote for the Buckland Hill funding, Rob?
I was not part of the Transpol committee that
That was at the
made those
PR
recommendations.
That was at PSRC.
Mhm.
Okay. It was the other commissioners?
It was Commissioner Brown.
Just Commissioner Brown.
Sits on that for the county.
Okay. Okay.
But along with the cities.
If you would have been there, is that the right choice to vote for?
You know, when I think about sort of the impact that it can have, there's a certain amount of, I mean, the adage that, you know, development is responsible for building some of that infrastructure. When you talk about sort of the circulation, the ability to move traffic around, sort of that's a center of a regional center for our local economy. That's what the county really needs to be focusing on, is our ability to make that the best engine that it can be. Not to say that ski is not important, but there's a certain amount of it that, because it's fully within the city of Bremerton and.
Okay, so let me kind of give the same question that Chris got, because I may have minimized what your statement was earlier. I know you were just mentioning one characteristic that would attract businesses in the county. In your opinion, what else can a county be doing to bring people here or grow jobs or things like that?
Yeah.
What are the strategies right now?
Well, thank you for that. When it comes to getting back to sort of the economic development and our ability to attract businesses to Kitsap County, and especially North Kitsap, because that's really is my focus, although we represent the entire county based on the districts, that's really been my intention. Ski is great, but we have plenty of opportunities up in North Kitsap with the 12 Trees Center. That is one of the commercial areas in the unincorporated Kitsap County that talk about the ability to support businesses locally. That project was done very well because it went in as a master plan. So all of the infrastructure, all of the design, everything was set up well in advance. So when the market drove it, then they could pull the trigger on developing or building new footprints on that site. So that's really how we can help support by doing a master plan process and supporting businesses so that they can move forward and pull the trigger when they have the funding to build.
What's in 12 Trees?
12 Trees, Watson Furniture is up there, TMF, which is a CNC machine company. There's a whole bunch.
Can I go to 12
So-
Trees? Sorry.
Well, and there's other, I think that some of the forethought that the county did is having some of these areas, the local areas of more intensive rural development,
Right.
those landmarks, to provide some of that local economic engine areas within the rural communities, I think is what we do. And also continuing to make sure that we can move forward in a very expedient way with our permitting process to make sure that when businesses come, that we're ready to make it happen. Anecdotally, just the other day, heard that somebody dropped off some plans to be approved, thinking it was going to take about a month or so, and was getting ready to go on vacation, and we already approved the permit, and got a call before he was going to head off on vacation. So I mean, the whole lean process improvement and looking at how we can, through the Department of Community Development, continue to support the economic. It really needs to be the Department of Community and Economic Development, because that's what it really needs to focus on. And that's what the county commissioners have been, and I have been supporting that staff to say, this is the right work to be doing.
No question?
Yes, I've heard two divergent viewpoints here, and I'd like to get some clarification. I've heard that the county should be involved in ecotourism, and I've heard also that the county should be getting out of land management. So my question is, what is the role and the scope of the county government, of the commissioners? Give us your viewpoint. Where are the limitations? What should the county commissioners be doing for Kitsap County?
In terms of land use?
In a general concept, what is the role and the scope of the county commissioners? Let's start with this.
Okay. Well, I think the role of the county, and when you look at the RCWs, like the state of Washington's constitution, the role of the county government should be, and I'm not saying get away from land management, that's not what I'm saying. I think that we need to maintain a level playing field across the board. Oftentimes, because one particular commissioner has a pet project or has a disagreement with the landowner, oftentimes they are not allowed to exercise the full use of their land or be able to develop their land. Certainly, we must have comprehensive plans. We have to have an SMPS mandated by the state of Washington. But I think that the role of the county commission really is to make sure that each and every person who goes and applies for a permit, each and every person who has a parcel of property is treated equally in particular projects. A great example would be, there's a large tract in central Kitsap of property owned by an individual, which should have been included in the central Kitsap UGA, urban growth area. This large tract of land was left out, and I don't think it was left out, and I think more people would agree that it was not left out because it shouldn't have been part of the UGA, but the land was left out because of a personal disagreement between the commissioner many years ago and the landowner. So this landowner had a large tract of land who he could do nothing with. He couldn't develop his land, couldn't possibly touch his land, couldn't move his land forward to develop it the way he'd like to. There's a large facility and large project he'd like to put together. And up until last year, he wasn't able to do that. Well, now this is an election year, and he is a large landowner, and now there's a special exemption in the Central Kitsap UGA to include that land if they build for the exact purpose that he would like to build. Now, the project is right. I absolutely support the landowner. The project was absolutely right. It's well conceived. He's put over $250,000 into planning this project. Could be huge, a lot of potential for Kitsap County. But why is it during election years that we go ahead and we make this one special exception? And it's a very specific exemption that really only he can use the land to use the way he would like. That's a great example. And I think Kitsap County's gone wrong. I think with the lack of a county administrator, we have commissioners who make a phone call to the DCD director or whomever it may be and say, look, I would like you to do this. And then as soon as Rob's off the phone, I'm on the phone saying, I'd like you to do this. And it's the opposite direction. So we need to depoliticize the DCD. We need to depoliticize building and land use planning. You know, very few members of the shoreline committee that reviewed and wrote the ordinance for the SMP were actually shoreline owners of shoreline property. You know, if we're going to ask for input, we're going to ask to include individuals. We need to let, you know, be an honest open forum. And I think oftentimes that we don't do that. And so what I would offer is that I would insist that we step back from DCD and that we let them be depoliticized. I think land use is certainly crucial. The commissioners have taken themselves out of land use rulings for appeals. I think the commissioners should be part of land use. I mean, ex parte is important. I think we have to have the commissioners be that appeals. I don't think you go to Superior Court. I think you go from DCD to your commissioners because those are your elected representatives. The job of the county commissioner when it comes to land use, and we have a considerable amount of authority when it comes to land use, is to protect the private property of the landowner and to allow development that is reasonable for the community.
You believe that if in the cause of the common good, that landowner rights sometimes should take second fiddle?
I do not, and I'll tell you. I think that in the state of Washington, Article 1, Section 1 of the Washington State Constitution says that government derives its just power at the consent of the governed, and it goes farther forward to say that land rights are a paramount right in Washington State. I think that by and large, overall, I'm not going to allow a strip mall, or I'm sorry, you know, a coal mining facility to go in the middle of a community development. I don't think that that's appropriate. But I think by and large, you let property develop as the economy and the market allows for it. You don't force or stymie or destroy potential growth. I mean, look at Polk. If Polk would like to develop their land within reason, and we look at these different parcels of acreage, or if they want to sell land, let's let them sell the land. I think the real question is why have they sat on it for the last 10, 20, 30 years and not developed it? Because they really can't develop it the way they'd like to. And the county won't allow that in planning.
Okay, Rob, what is the role of the commissioners, particularly in regard to land use and land development?
Well, the role of the Board of County Commissioners in that scope, it's really, we have to take a step back and look at what, you have the Growth Management Act. That really creates the framework by which that we are obligated to operate. And so the county commissioners, our role is to work with all the various jurisdictions and come up with our respective comprehensive plans. And that looks at, with undergrowth management, that's pushing the density into the urban areas and out of the rural areas. So you're looking at, in the specific, within the rural area, what levels of zoning are there? And that zoning allows you to do different things. Getting back to the local areas of more intensive rural development, the LAMRAs. That's just one example of an existing zone that's allowed to exist in that area. So our role really is to help balance out based on the population allocation that comes to us and is appropriated or apportioned through the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council to the various jurisdictions, then looking at how do we craft through our land capacity analysis and everything else that goes into it, how do we craft a comprehensive plan that supports not only the residential community, but local economic development, because there's a certain amount of capacity there that's for commercial use and that type of thing. So really our role as county commissioners are to be the stewards, to be the facilitators of that conversation, and unfortunately to stick with the Growth Management Act. To that end, I think that's one of the things that we need to urge our local legislative delegation to work on, because there's aspects of the Growth Management Act that I think are broken. Appeals are good, but there's not enough of a definition there. When you talk about the comprehensive plan remand that we just wrapped up, that's again 6 years that we've been under our current quote-unquote comprehensive plan, and we've yet to see, without it being challenged, sort of the impacts of that on our local community. We don't know if it works yet. And now if we're lucky and no one else brings an appeal to us, then we will have to start working next year, getting ready to begin developing our 2016 plan. So it is a challenge, but I think really overall, our role is to help facilitate that flow of the population, but also to make sure that there is space and capacity for all the various uses.
Do you believe that promoting ecotourism and safeguarding watersheds requires that the county take active steps, particularly with regard to landowner rights, to bring them into compliance?
I think that a lot of the regulation that comes down from, there's a certain amount, there's a shoreline management program that is part of the SMA that we need to update. That is one of the areas that we do look at regulations of property owners to ensure that we can maintain a certain amount of quality of the water in the discharge and runoff. But we also do that, we have a lot of other federal regulations that come down that impact a lot of the standards in the building when it comes to stormwater, et cetera. So all of those come to play. Some of that has a certain amount of local influence, in other parts it's just local implementation. But I think that ultimately, when it comes to we all have a part to play when it comes to water quality, whether it's the water quality in the ground or what's imputed sound. So I think there is a certain amount of where the common good does play out, but I think it's about how do we approach that and how do we do it in a way that's responsible and equitable.
We're about at an hour, which is what we planned on for this meeting. So we're going to give you both a minute to give us a last closing statement, anything that maybe we missed that you wanted to get in there to let the board know before we finish. So we'll let Rob and then Chris will finish.
Well, before I just wanted to touch on one thing that I didn't have a chance to talk about before, and that's about the Central Kitsap UGA and why an election year. And it wasn't about an election year, it was about the fact that we were under comprehensive plan remand, and it just made sense in terms of the county's infrastructure and what we were responsible for. When you have a force main, sewer and water and services and infrastructure going through a piece of property, it makes sense that it's part of the urban growth area as opposed to an area that would be a lot more expensive for the county to support. But I appreciate very much your time and participation as part of the editorial board. I think it's an important process during the election season, and I look forward to hopefully getting your support this year, but also more importantly to those watching this and to the citizens of Kitsap County. I've appreciated the opportunity and responsibility of serving them over the past 18 months, and I hope to have their support for another 4 years.
And again, thank you again for having us and hosting us today. You know, I think you deserve, and we deserve, Kitsap County, a government that works for us, that does not dictate to us what we must do. I think that we certainly must value the property owner and the owner of the property just more so than the will of the good. I think, you know, we deserve to have a county government that's not only responsive to us, but not just making favors and special partnerships because it may or may not be an election year. My priorities over the next 4 years are to have an independent performance auditor for Kitsap County. I want to propose putting together an independent performance audit commission. I'd like to have that individual go through, much like in the city of Bremerton, where item by item, they look at each department and they manage each department in the sense that they offer recommendations for cost-benefit analysis. You know, I want charter government. I think in Kitsap County, we've come to the time where we need a charter government. I'd like to take another look at that. I'd propose as a commissioner to call the election freeholders. That's where we get all the people in Kitsap County, 15 to 30 people elected at large, to write a new charter for Kitsap County. So we can get away from Democrat and Republican issues. I mean, the coroner shouldn't be a partisan position. Let's go ahead and think how we can really smartly grow Kitsap County and have more of an effective and responsive county government, economic development, and then, you know, I think that we have to have a strong prioritization of the county government. You know, we have to fund that first dollar of law enforcement, that last 10 cents. And with that, I'm Chris Tibbs, and I ask for your vote and your consideration. Thank you.
Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.